Hi everyone, my name is Sid Pila. We're going to just give it a minute to get started here. I'm excited to welcome you on this, hopefully will be a fun webinar on employee benefits to give you a reprieve from the world of open enrollment. There's only so many pamphlets that we can read on a daily basis, so I'm sure that we're gonna get a nice break from all of that. Um, we're talking about who we're going to be for Halloween. I just shared that I'm going to be a dragon that's lacking wings, and Matt reminded me the power of cardboard. So, thank you to one of our clients, I guess, who's a cardboard manufacturer, a corrugated paper manufacturer, I should say. Now I've learned the proper terminology for enabling my current costume. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get started. So we're gonna start off with introductions. Don, Matt, we've known each other in our personal lives now. That's not at this point for several years, I think. I know that we all have had this conversation over all sorts of side rooms at events like the Financial Health Network's Emerge, which everyone should attend, and the Worker Solutions Lab's most recent Worker Class Insights Forum. So I'm excited to make this a virtual event for folks to be able to listen in on our insights and it really have it be focused and across all sorts of different benefits because now as we're rolling out and going through open enrollment, people our employees are selecting which healthcare to go with, which financial benefits to go with. But it's also a reminder to all the people that enable those things in the first place about what's working and what's not. What's a trick or what's a treat, I guess. So we'll go through a set of introductions. I'm gonna have Matt, you go first, and what we're gonna make sure to do is just if you can do a quick elevator pitch on yourself and your organization, maybe something exciting about what your organization is doing right now in the space, and obviously because Halloween's around the corner, you must share with us your favorite Halloween candy. So go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Sid, and appreciate you and the Sunny Day Fun team for inviting us to come talk. So I'm Matt Ball. I'm Vice President, Head of Workplace Financial Health at the Financial Health Network. We are a 501(c)(3) nonprofit whose mission is to improve financial health for all. Best way to think about us is we're a think tank that does stuff. So we're not just putting out glossy white papers with highfalutin ideas. It's all about how do these apply in the real world. And one of the things we're really excited about is a new report we published as well as some work we've been doing with employers around this idea of essential benefits, which is a first of its kind framework that helps organizations quantify the actual impact their wage and benefit programs have on the financial health of their workforce. So, really answering the question of what works and how do organizations prioritize and optimize their existing benefit spends towards the solutions that are the most likely to improve outcomes for workers and ultimately rebound to the benefit of the businesses for those workers. My favorite Halloween candy, it's no question, it's sweet tarts. I'm a sweet tart person all the way through. I eat them year round, and Halloween's just an excuse to consume more than is humanly, appropriate for anyone.
Okay, well, I'll have to ask the Financial Health Network about its dental benefits. Uh, uh, sorry, I couldn't help it. John, we'll go to you next, and Matt, we'll come back to you about that essential benefits report. I read it; it's got some great juice in there. We'll dive into that here in a second. But Don, please introduce yourself, the Worker Solutions Lab, and of course, give us your favorite Halloween candy.
Sure. Don Baylor Jr., based in Austin, Texas, CEO of Worker Solutions. Worker Solutions is a platform that advises middle market companies, small and medium-sized businesses, on how to improve their benefits to really align with their goals and priorities. And so I think particularly for those companies that have a majority of working class employees, we can provide a value add and make sure that they're getting the most out of the benefits that they offer, but also consider, stable takes benefits like emergency savings with Sunny Day Fund. We really also rely heavily on Matt and Financial Health Network for the connections that they provide, but also the insights that they provide through their think tank. I've always been passionate about this work. I've probably been in the financial security work for working class folks for 25 years now. And I think to be able to do it at larger and larger scale, not just through policy but through practice, is really kind of what gets me up in the morning. Um, I don't like Halloween candy. I don't like candy. I am probably the stingy. I play the Scrooge on Halloween, but if I were to eat candy, it would be hot tamales. I have something about the spice and the cinnamon that got me going.
Sounds like trick-or-treaters are getting like an apple or a toothbrush from your house, Don. That's what it sounds like.
That's about right. No cavities out.
It's like the exact opposites. Within two people. That was very, very quick, y'all. And I'm being a very poor host. I should probably do the same bit on myself. So, as I introduced myself in the beginning, my name is Sid Pila. I'm the founder and CEO of Sunny Day Fund. I've had the privilege of getting to know Matt and Don through the World of Financial Health Network and Worker Solutions Labs over the course of the last 3, 4 years plus. And what gets me up in the morning in this space is honestly just seeing it all happen. I think that we a lot of us envision the type of change that we want to see in the world, and I think both Matt, you and Don have actually seen your ideas be implemented with individuals, with communities, with employers, so with states, and I think it's extremely interesting to see those ideas actually bear out. And I think that for us, what gets me up in the morning is that saver that calls in and shares the story of what made their day, what made their day sunny in our case, right? And my favorite Halloween candy is well, I'm gonna be totally unoriginal. It is Twix. I must say, it's just so good. I'm the guy that likes texture in my candy, and I don't know how you can not have that. We definitely make sure that we go through Costco bags full of candy. Sidebar, when I was at University of Virginia, we would go through about $500 of candy in a single night because like thousands of kids and all of Charleston would come through, and it was pretty cool. Like lots of great costumes there.
The question is, are you a right Twix or a left Twix person?
I
I know
knew
that's
it
a
was
battle in
coming.
the
I
Twix
knew it was
world.
coming. It's all Twix. It's all Twix. Uh, yeah, no, it's funny. We would do these depending on how many beers we've had. We would do blind taste at the left and the right Twix, and obviously somehow the left Twix has always won.
Yeah, it's very Seinfeld of you to be teeing up the
Exactly.
Twix buffet
Exactly.
question.
Exactly. Exactly. All right, so here's how we're going to format this. So we're going to start off with the fact that employee benefits don't need to be that scary, and because being afraid is basically being driven by the uncertainty of what's to come, right? And the thing is, there's been so much great research that's been done in this space, and what we're going to do is we're going to have Matt share some of the great work that Financial Health Network has done recently. And Don, coming off the Working Class Insights Forum, so you probably have some great takeaways from there as well. And I'll share some research that we have upcoming as well that we were excited to talk about. And from there, we're really going to go into a much faster segment where we're going to be talking about basically most financial benefits and employee benefits that your employer may have put in front of you. We probably won't hit every single thing in the ecosystem, but the whole idea is to talk about what we have seen as something that's either working or not necessarily working as intended, or some of the things that to keep in mind as you're rolling out that benefit. So get ready for that fast pace. And I just want to encourage you that the Q&A is open, chat is open. Feel free to jump in and share if you are looking to get some insight on any particular benefit along the way. With that, I'm going to ask Matt for you to go first and talk about your most recent essential benefits study that came out.
Sure, and I just dropped a link to the Essential Benefits Study in the chat. It's a free report, would encourage folks to look at it. But it was really animated by trying to answer some key questions. One question is, what works? What are the solutions that actually help move the needle on improving financial health for the workforce? As related to that, one of the questions we all the time is, I've got a finite budget. Where do I prioritize my spend? And there's no shortage of solutions in the marketplace, no shortage of pathways to take. But what we've seen is often overstated claims of impact or understated claims of impact. And so really wanting to provide clarity to workplaces and those interested in worker financial health with a data-driven approach to quantify the associated effects and impacts of different wage and benefit offerings. We also see this as really valuable because employers spend literally trillions of dollars a year in the economy on wages and benefits. And despite that investment, what we've seen in our data is financial health has been relatively stagnant. We're not seeing a lot of movement, particularly from folks who are financially coping into financially healthy. Now, there's lots of movement within those subcategories, but really trying to help organizations be more strategic and have a more impact-based framework for assessing the solutions they make. Market-based benchmarking is useful. It can certainly tell you what you need to offer to get, certain people to accept certain roles, but it doesn't tell you what it's doing for people once they're there. And we know that that's often a question we get is, how do I know I'm investing in the right things? So we really sought to answer that question. From our research, what I think there's a few high-level takeaways, and I know we'll get into some of the specifics when we do the speed round. But number one, we continue to see that wages play a central role. And wages really undergird financial health. It's the essential building block and input for financial health. What our research has shown and what our friends and partners at the Living Wage Institute have done through some of their other work is we just have way too many folks that are earning below a living wage. And that has a real big effect on not just their financial health, but the effectiveness of the other solutions that are being offered. In other words, thinking of wages more as a threshold above which certain things are possible, below which many things are not possible, really shown through in that. But of course, financial health is not just about wages. It involves a whole other suite of benefits. And so within our report, we were able to identify which of those benefits had the highest likelihood of improving financial health, which of those had neutral effects, meaning they didn't seem to be doing much. That could just be a result of the nature of the product. So life insurance, for example, didn't register much of effect. Well, the benefit isn't used until there's a death, at which point it converts to income, which we know is highly relevant and important to financial health. So we would never tell someone, don't offer life insurance. We know it's hugely important and relevant, but holding the policy itself maybe isn't an indication of financial health. Then we saw some solutions that had negative associations. Doesn't mean that they were causing decreases in financial health. What it really pointed to was the high volume users of certain solutions were folks that were already earning below a living wage or were facing chronic financial shocks. And I think understanding what certain solutions solve for, what they don't solve for, is a really important contextual variable for organizations to think about as it goes through it. And I would say the last two pieces of insight, one of which is access alone is insufficient. How programs and benefits are designed has a huge impact. So, for example, health insurance. If you're offering a high deductible health plan, but there are no dollars going into the health savings account, that is equivalent from a financial health perspective to having no insurance at all. But the second you get money into that HSA, even de minimis amounts, $25, $50 a pay period, all of a sudden that health plan has a net benefit on people's financial health. And it makes intuitive sense. So much of our healthcare programs in this country are financial. The ability to afford care, the mental load that comes with that, really wanting to understand what's happening with the design of those benefits really matters. And that carries through for a lot of the other solutions we identify. We think there's huge opportunities for innovation, huge opportunities for folks like Dawn and the team who are doing some really amazing work with their platform to really bring in the perspective of impact focused. What do these do and how do we know they're working so that employers can better optimize their existing benefit spend? It's not always about adding more dollars to the benefit spend. It's about, are you investing in the things that are the most likely to improve outcomes for your workforce? The last big insight, and have Dawn talk about some of the great work they're doing, is it really deepens the understanding of the ROI for employers. And I think you hear lots of studies around, oh, it's a productivity boost or it's a retention boost. And yeah, that's true. But the real thing it does, it's a loyalty play. And it deepens the sense of commitment that workers have to the place where they work. And it's that deepening sense of commitment and feeling seen and validated and having a little bit of dignity in their daily lives. That actually what generates the productivity gains, what generates the decreases in workplace safety incidents, and all the other studies we know that are really strong and empirically validated. But the mechanism is loyalty. It's about valuing people. And whether people want to wrestle with that or not, the truth is when people feel validated, they're more engaged, they turn over less, they're more productive. And there's even great studies we point to that talking about the returns on profitability for the businesses. This shouldn't be read as an algorithm. If I do X, Y will happen. Humans are going to human, and there's lots of complicated things. But this study really moves us way down the road in terms of better understanding what are the essential things people need in order to improve their financial health through the workplace.
Matt, that's a terrific overview. And just in case you joined after Matt started, he did share the link to the essential benefits study in the chat. I highly encourage you to check it out. I think that there's a couple of variations of it as well. One that's a quicker read too. So please make sure to check out the data that's in there. I'm going to ask Don to go next. You recently, Ian Worker Solutions Lab in Lafayette Square recently hosted its very first Working Class Insights Forum. And it, of course, covered a variety of different topics, that, employee benefits being part of it, but also employee ownership, affordable housing. I was wondering if you can share some of the insights from the Working Class Insights Forum.
Yeah, sure. So thank you, Matt. Thank you, Matt, and thank you, Sid. Um, Earlier this month, we had a Working Class Insights Forum where I think we had about 150 attendees spread across 2 half days in Middleburg, Virginia. And I think that's, certainly part of our identity is that place matters, and certainly working class places matter. And so, you do see different outcomes based upon your zip code. I don't think that's any mystery or any surprise. But what you do see is a difference in local leadership, where there is a values alignment with what is in the best interest of the working class folks in my particular jurisdiction. And so, there was a lot of discussion about where we were, which is next to, really kind of the capital of data centers, particularly for AI. And so lots of discussion there about, AI, data centers, land use, affordable housing, and how these can be shaped. And I think one of the big insights, that we have from that discussion was certainly the mismatch of power between global tech companies and uh, a city council or a mayor that is working part-time, right, and does not have the resources to be able to really kind of defend their jurisdiction against something that 95% of the people don't want. And so I think that is certainly something to watch going forward. We did actually have a session on AI, and how it can really empower and not displace the working class. I think, we are building a tool that is based in AI that, we hope that will make it easier for employers to improve benefits and improve financial security for their workers. And I think that we're at the forefront, and many of our partners are at the forefront, like Sid, like Manifest, and really using this tool in a very critical way to really make substantive changes in financial security. I think one of the other things is around investors. And I think that, being connected to Lafayette Square, we see the value of what investors adhering to the true mandate of significant managerial assistance can really both drive returns by lowering turnover, but also make improvements in employee financial security. And so that extends to private equity, it extends, private credit, but it also extends to public capital. If you think about pension funds, whose source of revenue actually comes from workers, there's a lot that state and local pension funds can do to really move the needle to make sure that employee benefits are maximized, particularly for working class families. And then I think there's also, this sense of around, um, household financial health really kind of depends on both state, federal, and policy and product alignment. And so there was a really interesting discussion that Sid was a part of that was, how do products arise in response to a policy action, or how do they emerge out of a void, a policy void? And so I think that's, kind of how we kind of see the world just in terms of how important policy is, not just policy change, but understanding how current policy affects products and ways to deliver employee benefits. And so we're going to run this playback again next year around the same time, same bat channel. And so hope to see some of y'all there.
Thanks so much, Don. And I'm sure you're going to appreciate this segue. It is Halloween. We're going to talk about something scary, and we're going to carry the conversation specifically forward on the policy side. And that is about 42 million people losing access to SNAP benefits and other public benefits this week. I'm going to come back to you, Matt, and Don, feel free to step in as well. You're talking about essentially living wage and talking about like different thresholds on the wage side. We see this all the time when we're talking with employers. If they're on the manufacturing side or the health services side, they may have individuals that are making $38,000 per year. That's underneath the 250% of the federal poverty level, effectively passing the income limit test associated with SNAP benefits. So that's just the reality of the matter. So in essence, you have an individual or potentially even a household that may be having access to a greater suite of benefits as a result of the wage that they're sitting in. I'm very curious about what you're thinking about right now in that space, and what you have heard or read or about the interaction effect between wages and these income and asset limits that exist today, and perhaps some challenges that you may have for folks about changing that future.
Yeah, I think we also have to understand that there's a lot of family dynamics at play here as well, because many of the folks that qualify for these SNAP benefits are single parents or single income households with multiple dependents, maybe a spouse or partner with a disability. And I think sometimes we have in our minds that the only folks that are leveraging these benefits are people that are, a caricature of what we would assume are leveraging these. I can tell you just in the town I live in, a small town on the coast of Maine, we've seen massive, massive lines at some of the food pantries. And so it's already hitting people in terms of just the stone cold reality. And I think the living wage is a good way to sort of think about this. We know that living wage takes into account a whole set of different variables, including food as one of those things. Well, as inflation has continued to take hold, as food has become increasingly more expensive, it's taken a larger portion of existing dollar share, which means that families, even before these benefits were impacted, were often making trade-offs between, do I pay my electric bill? Do I pay my rent? Do I get food? And so you're really asking people not to make decisions around splurges. It's a decisions around the essentials. And I think that decision around essentials is really important to understand and internalize, because these aren't folks that are like spending, their excess income on Starbucks every day, or, getting access to those things or looking for treats. These are people that are just minimum subsistence. How do I just get through the day? How do I have access to those things? And so I think what you're seeing is you're going to continue to see increased rates of food, people going with food insecurity. It was already on the rise even before the impact to these benefits. And with these benefits now running out of funding or soon to run out of funding, and with no plan in sight that's conceivable at this point, I think we're going to be seeing, long lines at food pantries. You're going to seeing a lot of philanthropies trying to step up to support that. But the reality is that's just never going to scale to reach people as much as they are. And it also doesn't take into account just the role that shame plays in this. When I was the head of human resources for a large health system, people would come into my office and talk to me about everything. I knew more about people's sex lives than I ever wanted to know when I was an HR executive. but very few people would come and talk to us about their financial circumstance. We have an entire culture that places shame on people who aren't able to pick themselves up by a bootstrap and get through it without ever really understanding the complexity and the decisions that folks have to make on a daily basis, the mental toll that takes, and then how that ultimately shows up at the workplace. There are certainly some innovative companies that are doing some things that are helpful. I think our friends at Propel are doing some really interesting work around helping people navigate this. Companies like Spring4, which has a lot of great relationships within communities to help people navigate the complexity. But we also have to be frank about it. Even when Snap was up and running, navigating that bureaucracy on a monthly basis is an absolute nightmare. And the mental bandwidth it takes to ensure you're maintaining your assets and your income at a level to still qualify for this. We have seen data and reports. This impacts economic mobility in pretty significant ways because you may get offered a promotion at your job, but that promotion doesn't cover the things you'd be losing as a result of that. There are some companies that are trying to solve for this. I think of Leap Fund and a few others. I think this is why an emergency savings benefit is so critical because it gives people some liquid cushion as they're navigating these choices. So yeah, there's not a good news story here. I think people are going to have to rely more deeply on their communities, have to rely more deeply on charity, have to more deeply rely on maybe going without a full set of meals for the day. But the reality is people were doing that even beforehand. I think we're just going to see more people that are swooped up into that challenge because we've got way too complicated of a public benefit system. We don't really understand who's using those benefits or why they're using those benefits, and then we blame the people using them for not being enough of a hustler and grinding their way through their days in order to make it work. And I think it's just a deeply dehumanizing set of events that are going to be in the spotlight for the near future.
Yeah, I would certainly echo all of that. And just want to add, I think, the SNAP benefit issue, I think, is part of a larger trend that is becoming evident that we are in an era of disruption. I mean, if you look at, and particularly income disruption, SNAP benefits are a form of income. Um, and what you see relative to what's been happening, not just with government workers, public sector workers, you're going to obviously see this trickle down to this many of the states, um, and income disruption, employment disruption, has gone, not just, has spread from the tech industry to government, which affects um, pretty much everyone. Um, and then I think you throw in AI, there is just a sense of you don't know when the next shoe is going to drop, and that's a hard place to be in, for anyone, right? I think particularly for younger folks that are coming out of post-secondary education, um, it's you're only going to know you're just going to know disruption, and so I think being able to kind of swim your way and navigate through that, I think is certainly something that just the SNAP benefits just really kind of just generate that sense.
I think the through line with both your comments, Don and Matt, is that we need to recognize that individuals have lives that are beyond just the employer's specific people strategy goals for Q1 2026. It may be that the HR leader is hyper focused on advancement, but if we all of a sudden, are not paying attention to the fact that Snap's going to be something that might not be supporting that advancement, as you alluded to earlier, Matt. That's something that needs to be taken into account. It becomes a bigger conversation, and and more broadly, as you're talking, Don, about the potential systemic changes that will come into how we define even the word employer in the future, right? Are we employing just individual humans or others that are humanoids, right? I think that that's just where we're headed. It's just a reality. I think that is a reality that many workers are facing. Now, I'm gonna pare back from the scary stuff. I took us really deep there for a second. I thought it was given the current events, it made sense for us to reflect on it. And we're going to get to a play on something that I heard from Planet Money recently, which is essentially talking through all the different things that the government spends money on, and we're going to talk about all the different things that an employer spends money on. And we're going to start with some of the biggest ones first, and we're going to do, ideally no more than a couple sentences, but a unique insight that you may have on whether it's a trick, treat, something that to keep in mind for the folks that are attending this session. So let's start with healthcare. Obviously, an employee benefit, right? So who would like to go first? And we'll go back and forth.
Yeah, I'll go first. So I think healthcare itself is a treat, but the bag it's being dispensed from is on fire, is maybe the best way. I think, we have the most expensive healthcare system in the world with amongst the worst outcomes related to health for that. Yet we continually see that most people still gain access to health insurance through their employer. And from our essential benefits research, we know that health insurance is an essential component of people's financial lives, particularly as so much of our healthcare system has been financialized and it's really financially motivated in many regards with how health insurance is delivered. And so for us, it's not just about how those costs are shifted, but the affordability of the coverage. And what our report points to is the more affordable you can make their coverage, the more impactful that coverage is going to be. It's going to generate better outcomes. It's going to lead to better retention. It's going to have all of those things. But when you're facing both in the commercial market through employers and in the subsidy market through the ACA, I've seen some employers that are looking on average of 8 to 9% increases in their health insurance premium. Their claims haven't changed, the health of their workforce hasn't materially changed, but their costs are going up. And so it's one of those things where, because of the way we've designed our health system through the employer channel, it is absolutely essential. And how it's designed makes a big difference between whether it is a trick or whether it is a treat. And I think there are ways to make it more of a treat than a trick. But you have to understand that it's really the cost of healthcare is the factor. You can have all the fancy bells and whistles you want, but if people can't afford to leverage those things, you've effectively wasted a ton of money on those things that no one's going to use.
I'm gonna jump in there, Don, if you're okay with it, with two quick data points. One is we continue to hear that employers are shifting away from high deductible health plans because folks don't have the folks who are taking advantage, the HDHPs were intended for from an affordability perspective, are not coming up with a deductible portion in their HSA. So either they're funding through involuntary contributions to HSA, which is great. That's one way to bridge the gap. Or they're repackaging the treat, if you will, to use your metaphor. So I love that. And the second piece is health and wealth are very much related. Don?
Sure. So I think the scary part has to be um, the uh, the business model of the ICRA, right? Which really does rely on these ACA subsidies to really make work. And so I think that will be an interesting outcome to see how that will work, because however you like about the ACA, right? It had flaws, and the pay for is was not probably not executed as well as it could have been, right? And so I think it has put uh, that particular part of the ACA, very much in jeopardy because it is reliant on cash money to give people access to health insurance.
Yeah, and just some more data over here. So I think the current predictions is, and the ICRA is a big part of how uh, relatively smaller employers have been deploying healthcare, right? So they would, ICRA stands for Individual Contribution Health Reimbursement Arrangement or something like that. If I got that right, I feel like.
It's a scary acronym to remember all five of
Yeah,
those.
I will require a high five from Rachel Fox if I actually got that right. Uh, we are hearing roughly a 35 to 40% bump in case the existing program does change, which is what it's looking like will happen. And then Matt, coming back to you, I was kind of surprised at the 8 to 9%. What we've typically heard from the employers we've talked with this year has been about a 16 to 18% increase over there. So that's been
Yeah, I think
um,
I think that number is if you, I mean that's across the economy, but listen, there are large employers with scale that will be pushing back against those things, but those risk dollars then have to flow somewhere else. And I think what's going to end up happening is the businesses that don't have as much bargaining power or maybe are not self-insured are the ones that are likely going to be facing larger premiums. And so I do think it's simply a matter of the risk pool and the large players in the system can exert more influence over that, but those costs aren't going to go away. And so those
yeah,
costs are going to be dispersed in different ways. It's one of the challenges with the subsidy dilemma, which is the whole goal of the subsidy dilemma was to ensure that healthy people were enrolled to spread out the risk. Well, healthy people, quite rationally, I think, are going to look at the ACA increases and say, I'm not going to do this. I
yeah.
can't afford to do this. I'm going to go for it. But those people that are sick or have pre-existing conditions, they can't. And so it's actually likely going to be those folks who can least afford it, who are the most precarious, who are going to shoulder a larger burden of the cost. Because healthy people can have, they're more comfortable taking the risk of not participating. And that's part of
Yeah.
the reason why you see those increases in the public markets.
I feel like I just got a lesson on how insurance works. I love it. Thank you. And everyone as well. So, and just want to give a shout out to Kenyon for sharing, for example, state-based resources. It's certainly a great point, and also going through an interesting dynamic themselves. I do want to shift to retirement as which is kind of the second biggest spend area for an employer. So we're going from basically trillions of dollars to spend to another one that's trillions of dollars to spend. And retirement is really, really interesting here, right? Most employers that are on the larger side do offer a retirement plan, 401k, 403b, 457. Pensions, right? And increasingly, we're seeing all sorts of interesting mechanisms come into play. Whether it's participation and accumulating retirement assets, or decumulation and shifting to retirement income, or just figuring out where your money is and using Manifest to put them all in a single place again. I think there's a lot of interesting things happening. What are your insights, Matt and Don, in this space that you guide employers and their influencers?
Go ahead, Don.
Well, I think, we've worked with dozens of companies analyzing their retirement participation rates as well as their retirement plan design. And, we typically work with companies that have been in business for at least 10 years or longer, right? And there is, quite honestly, just a lot of employers that have just set it and forget it, particularly around retirement. They may change plan providers, but many of them either don't have the capacity to really um, maximize um, uh, their employees' participation, particularly on the working class employee side. So we typically see, um, you know, 20, 25% participation, retirement participation for frontline workers. And and it is not on many kind of mid-market SMBs mind to say, unfortunately, to say uh, we want to upgrade, we want to auto enroll, right? Um, and so those incumbent employers, Secure did a lot, 2.0 did a lot for plan design for new employers, but for incumbent employers, uh, we do need policy alignment because they do not see, many of them unfortunately do not see the value of making sure that most of their frontline workers are enrolled in retirement. And so I think there's got to be more thinking, creativity, particularly on the policy side, to be able to move the needle.
Yeah, plus one to all that, Don. And again, back to the essential benefits report. Um, Retirement savings has a huge boost to financial health. Even relatively small amounts into the retirement plan can have a massive benefit. I think there's two issues. One is access and one is design. Certainly, Secure 2.0 was intended to spur access, particularly for smaller businesses, through some of the rules around PEPs, G little OPs, MEPs. And the fact that you have all those acronyms should tell you exactly what's happening, which is it's a technically elegant law that is virtually practically impossible to implement at scale. And
And
so
invisible to employees.
and invisible. And the support services around that have just been really slow to materialize. We are seeing more activity now in the PEP and the MEP market, which I think could be, of some value. But the place where we've actually seen the largest growth in retirement plans have been those states with mandates. And that's not because those employers in those states are then enrolling in the state-sponsored plan. There's really interesting research highlighting that the fastest growth of new private plans are in those states with those mandates. And so I do think that that mandate has forced more employers to think about, well, how do I set up a simple K plan? Or how do I set up some of these features that are low cost, provide access, don't obligate the employer on a bunch of the compliance stuff that can be very expensive, makes it easier to set up the plan, creates a lot of great features. Even in our own report on essential benefits, we have seen the trend line ticking upwards in terms of access and participation in employer-sponsored plans. Now, that does nothing for the growing numbers of folks who work episodically, whether those are independent contractors or gig workers. And again, yes, they could go set up an IRA, but go try to set up an IRA and see the complexity of it, the understanding of it, the fees associated with it. So I think we are on an upward trajectory. I also think, I do a lot of work in the employee ownership space, employee ownership models. And I have to tell you, every time I'm at one of those conferences talking, the rooms are getting bigger. And I am seeing more momentum and interest around employee ownership models, whether those are ESOPs, some sort of equity award, whatever those may look like. And I think those can be new avenues for helping people build long-term financial security by sharing in the value that they help create within the companies that they work at. And so I do think that we are in a moment of transformation around what does retirement security look like. If you're in deep in that space like I am, the boring debates around required minimum distribution, the 4% rule, and what do you actually need to retire, those are all well and good. And I think those are, coming from those who are helping people make decisions about that. But the reality is the most common retirement balance today is still zero. We still see tens of millions of workers with no access
And just to
to
be
or
clear,
ability to
Matt, is
contribute.
that median or mode?
Mode.
Mhm.
It's mode,
Yeah.
which is the most common number. It's not the average balance. I mean, you'll see reports from the record keepers touting, 15% savings rates. It's like, well, yeah, within your book of business, where you've got most of the Russell 1000 companies, that's the case. But when the denominator doesn't include all those zeros, it can paint a very obscured view of what's actually happening. And so I also think like we're in a moment where we're starting to evaluate new models for long-term wealth creation. We've run the 40-year experiment with the 401k. I think we romanticize sometimes the DB plan era, where at its height, only about 40% of the workforce had access to a DB plan. In the private sector, it's less than 1 in 10 today. So those have certainly shifted. But we have to think differently about where the economy is going and how do we create more shared value and shared prosperity for long-term financial security. And I think that comes with recognizing the contributions that all of us make to the companies we work at, and how do we share in the upside of the value that's created. And I think that ethos is, and that's not a partisan ethos. This is a bipartisan sort of idea that's been floating around that I think has a lot of promise to sort of help augment and support the 401k system as it continues to ramp up, because I do think there's more innovation on the way.
So I definitely put my pumpkin on my Matt bingo card for long-term wealth creation. So thank you for that. Now we're going to definitely talk about employee ownership as related to that. But Matt, I specifically want to make sure that I created room for you to talk about HSAs as related to healthcare because
Yeah.
in your benefits report, there was some really interesting stuff there.
Yeah. I think, one of the thing about HSAs is the high volume users of those are people that can afford their out-of-pocket costs without tapping into the HSA. And
So
the
they're
reason for
using
that
it for
is
retirement,
using
essentially.
for retirement because
Yeah.
it's the greatest retirement savings vehicle ever made. It's triple tax benefits. You don't get taxed on the distributions, you don't get taxed on the growth. You can invest it. I mean, it's a really great solution. The problem is most people can't afford healthcare. And so the reality is that many people who could leverage the HSA would not use it to help create long-term financial wealth and stability, which is often how the HSAs are marketed, at least part of the marketing pitch is that. The reality is that it's a mechanism to help pay for the cost of care. And the difference between having even de minimis dollars into an HSA versus no dollars is a difference between having something that resembles insurance and having no insurance at all. Medical debt is still the number one cause of bankruptcy in the United States, including for those that have commercial insurance through their employer, and it's because of the costs. We also know the downstream impacts of this. We did a great project with a community bank in rural Maine. And through some analysis we did looking at their wage and benefit programs, we were able to pinpoint the exact dollar amount needed to be contributed per pay period to make that benefit a financial health boost. And it was $50 per pay period, so an additional $100 a month going into that. So they've implemented this now and announced it, and they have never received so much praise from their workforce. The emails that I'm seeing that are flooding in, because when you help meet a real actual need and you can communicate why you're doing it, lo and behold, more people are signing up for the HSA. They have moved towards a more high deductible health plan, mostly because of their insurance arrangement. I agree. We're hearing lots of conversation about moving away from HDHPs, but at the end of the day, when you look at the costs of an HDHP versus not, something's going to give. And whether that's wage growth, whether that's retirement contributions, we know that those healthcare dollar increases eat into budgets that take other solutions off the table. And I think taking those other solutions off the table can have a deleterious effect. If you'd have told me 5 years ago that I'd be out talking about the potential upside of a high deductible health plan, I would have called you a liar. But the reality is, it's not that the health plan design, it's the ability to fund it. And getting even de minimis dollars into that HSA is the difference, full stop. And so if you have a high deductible health plan, you have to find some way to get some funding into that so that people can better use the benefit and it becomes a net positive as opposed to the same as having no insurance at all.
Yeah, that's incredible insight. And I'm going to shift us now to a faster variation of this, where I'm gonna throw a couple things at you at once. So we're gonna throw childcare and paid sick leave at you at once. So Don.
Uh, you know, childcare is a completely broken system. Um, Whether or not you're talking about the public policy that governs it, it's also a very fragmented system that, um, you know, is not paid very, the workforce is not paid very well. Support subsidy for childcare, we believe, should be an employee benefit. It is good. We believe that the dependent care uh, amount got increased going forward. Um, there needs to be a way to make sure, and I think there are solutions on the market that make sure that folks are really not out of pocket for a significant amount of time. Um, because even though that uh, tool can have promise for working class families, the design of how it gets implemented, do you front the first 2,000 of that dependent care FSA? Um, do you implement a solution that goes along with it so it's not your typical reimbursement situation, which is very manual and time intensive. So I think there's room out there for new thinking about what does a subsidized childcare benefit look like, given you know the rising costs and elevated cost of childcare.
Yeah,
I'll leave Matt for paid
plus
leave.
one, plus one to all that. I think on paid leave, it's a very similar thing, which is we are the only OECD country. If you don't know what OECD is, it's basically the top economies in the world that doesn't have a paid leave program. We don't have it. Estonia gives 89 weeks of paid leave to families. We give 12 weeks if you have over 50 employees and it's unpaid unless it's subsidized by the employer. And so we've just completely lost sight of the reality of how people live their lives. I mean, I have 3 kids. Schools just started. I have a sick kid home once a week. And thankfully, I'm in a job where I've got a lot of flexibility. I have the ability to do that. And so I think you have to think about paid sick leave more in terms of workplace flexibility and just sort of recognizing that people's lives are not constrained to the time that they're spending in the workplace, but that they've got a lot of other obligations. We now are in an era where usually both income earners in a household have to work in order just to afford the essentials, which places an additional strain on that. I think one of the interesting ways to think about childcare is oftentimes the subsidy programs that do exist only go towards those accredited institutions that offer childcare. And I understand that, like it's great. But a lot of people's backup childcare is the grandma, the aunt, the uncle, the older sibling. And there's no mechanism for which to compensate folks for that time. And so what ends up happening is you constrain the amount of available resources for childcare. One of the reasons why it's expensive is because there's not a lot of options that are available, which increases the cost. It's just a simple supply and demand. And at the same time, these institutions that do childcare have amongst the highest turnover rates because they can't afford to pay their staff without exploding the cost. So I agree, Don. Childcare is a challenge, but I think paid sick leave also falls into that. We actually have a brief coming out in November that looks at what we think are some of the financial health design best practices for thinking about a paid family leave circumstance and how employers can be thinking about that. What are some easy things, no cost things that they can do? Things like transitional return to work when someone's coming off of a leave. It's not as though caregiving responsibilities end after an FMLA period or a state sponsored period. Those often continue. So how do you think about ramping people back up as opposed to, turning the faucet back on to 100 to do that? But there's lots of opportunities around paid sick leave. One thought on unlimited PTO. That was a real hot benefit. Employers that offer unlimited PTO have amongst the lowest PTO usage. People don't use it.
Yeah.
And it's so unlimited doesn't do it. I think I'm a big believer. You've got to have a confined program, and it's a benefit people have earned. And when people feel they've earned the benefit, then they're going to avail themselves of that benefit. Lots of great research on the impacts on mental health for having access to paid leave. Lots of evidence on worker retention related to that. It's certainly one of the essential benefits we highlighted in there. And I think we have to recognize that people's lives are not just confined to those 8 hours or 10 hours or 12-hour shifts that they're working, but it's a 24-hour thing. And people's lives are infinitely more complex. It's more episodic. And given the lack of access to care and other things in the communities where a lot of these folks work, it falls on their shoulders. And unfortunately, at the moment, employers are the only place where there's any sense of solutioning around this. I'm going to drop in the chat an article that was just published today because as Maine goes, so goes the nation. But one of the largest employers in Maine, Bath Iron Works, they build ships for the Navy, has just struck a partnership to build new workforce housing and a subsidized childcare facility. We're actually starting to see more examples of this. Now, they tend to be larger companies where they're recognizing that their talent pipelines are impacted by the strain of care. And so finding new ways to think about old company town models, and those were certainly not perfect, but I think employers are starting to recognize that this is a place where they can have an impact to stabilize their workforce, to improve efficiency in their production, and ultimately to provide a value benefit that is going to be, a beacon of best in class employers, larger employers primarily, smaller employers. I think that the world is still pretty challenging to navigate.
Yeah, and I'll share a piece from the Financial Times that's doing a deep dive in Allentown and Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, doing something similar. So great model. I know we're coming up on time here. I thought I'll group together a bunch of things that are typically packaged as financial wellness. Obviously, emergency savings that has come up a couple times. Small dollar loans, earned wage access, financial education, financial coaching. If I think that my question here is, as you're thinking about these benefits, like how do you think about them? Like how do you package them? What is the right package of treats that make sense for employers?
Yeah, I'll go quick, Don. ESAs and financial coaching. Uh, of those solutions, I think that's the strongest evidence base that those are a net benefit to financial health. Financial education, I believe in education. I think people should be taught finances. Doing it in the workplace has been an unmitigated failure. Putting up a static website or bringing someone in to do a series of sessions, you're going to get one of two things. One, no one's going to engage, or all the Dave Ramsey fanatics in your workforce are going to show up to try to get some insight. Financial coaching has proven to be a far more effective model, especially when it's paired with benefit navigation, right? Helping people better understand and maximize the use of their benefits, wildly effective, and that also shows up. Small dollar loans and EWA, these were two solutions in our report that we saw that had negative associations, but I think there's some important context to set around that. Our report did not say that they caused it. That's not what our report said. But think about it from the perspective of a worker. If you are falling behind on your bills because you're not earning enough income, these types of solutions can be really helpful in the moment. So they're sort of the candy corn that you get. You know, it's like, yes, it's a piece of candy, but long term, it's not the candy I want or the candy that's the most effective for solving that. And part of it's because what we see in the data is the high volume users of those products are people that are not having misalignment with their payroll timing and their bills. If that's actually the problem, you can change your pay frequency at a much more effective way to address that. These are folks that are living below the living wage threshold by and large. They experience chronic financial shocks. And I don't know a single person who experiences a financial shock whose first thought is, you know what I need? More debt. It's one of the reasons why an ESA, I think, is a far better solution many times. That being said, I think there are going to be some use cases where these make sense, and there's some innovation happening in this space that are really positive and really good and really helpful. The other thing you have to understand about small dollar loans and EWA, some of the small dollar loans have credit building features, which I think can be a positive. There are other ways to do that rather than taking out more debt to do this. But the reality is, if people aren't leveraging these solutions to the workplace, what are they doing? Well, we just released our spend report this year, which tracks what people spend on financial services. So I'll tell you, they're going to a payday lender, they're going to a pawn shop, they're selling plasma, they're using buy now, pay later services. And so oftentimes employers can set up these programs in ways that are more advantageous to their workforce than what's available in the direct to consumer market. But you have to know what problem you're trying to solve.
Right.
If you're trying to solve misalignment between bills and payroll, that's not actually an EWA or a small dollar loan problem. That's a timing of your payroll problem, which can be fixed in other ways. If you're trying to help people build credit, there's lots of ways to do that that don't involve them having to take out debt in order to do this. So I view these really as if you're drowning in the ocean and someone throws you a stick and that stick's going to evaporate after 100 yards, you're really thankful for that 100 yards that you've got that stick. But what you really need is a life raft. And you have to think about what these solutions are designed to do, what they do, and what problems they solve. I think there's a place for them in workplace strategies, but to my mind, these are solutions of last resort. And you should be thinking about all the other ways that you can solve the core issue as opposed to giving them access to a product that ultimately is going to cost them money, money that they maybe don't already have enough of in order to get through their daily lives.
No, I
Dom?
mean, yeah, echo a lot of that. Certainly, I don't know how this happens, but emergency savings accounts ends up being the number one recommendation that we put forth for a good chunk of our companies. Um, I think what we're seeing now, just zooming out a little bit, right, is everyone knows we're also in an era of unaffordability. And I think there was a moment where employers were the enemy because they weren't paying enough. Um, I don't think that's the argument now. I think employers have, you know, obviously they need to pay a wage that's competitive, but uh, the cost of living is beginning to swallow up employers' capacity to provide compensation, and so rethinking employee benefits, particularly in this era that we're in terms of are there is there a path for subsidies like childcare or even it sounds crazy, but even housing, because I think you are going to see this mismatch between income and expenses. I think can continue to really separate.
Yeah, I think that I'm seeing this aspect of like where can I have multiplicative effect as an employer where a dollar is actually $4 to $5 in return. And I think you covered it all really well. I know that we're at time here. I know there was a bunch more, and it makes me feel like we need to come up with a Thanksgiving variation and then a holidays variation of this as well to keep it going. This was an excellent conversation. Thank you for diving deeper and providing both of your perspectives. Really honor both your times, and I wish you both a very happy Halloween. We're expecting full pictures associated with both of your costumes. And please feel free to share it with us so that if you want, we can even add it to our newsletter. Thank
Wonderful.
you
Thank
both,
you,
and
Sid.
wish you a happy Halloween.
Same.
All right. Thanks.
Cheers.